This is going to be a quick but detailed guide to beating Suicune. This strategy was adapted from the Chinese community's first kill that used 3 Blissies with some slight improvements. First by Manoveric, Secret, GG, and Jedge Guns. And then I've tweaked it a bit. Our group, Rainer, myself, Scott, and Kyle were able to make some tweaks and hopefully improve it, make it a lot better. But basically, the strategy revolves around getting 3 Blissies set up with Ingrain so that they're not swapped out. Dry Skin so that they heal under the Permarain that's set at 80%. And then having 1 Blissey set light screens from there on out, 1 Blissey continuing to Captivate, and then the light screen and last and third Blissey alternating between using Psywave and Seismic Toss so that they're able to do 2% damage each time, and the alternating damage type shield is nullified essentially because you're only doing damage with those 2 typings. Once you have those all set up, you've got the light screens going, you have the Captivates going, those Blissies can virtually live forever. The wrinkle that we've added is the light screen just makes it so that there is very little variation. Sometimes the Suicune will target 1 Blissey and it can make it a little bit scary, especially if you're using Wish. The light screen just makes all damage basically brushed off by the Blissies, and to the point that even the 4th player that is used to set up everything can have their last Pokemon live for a very long time. We had a Ferrothorn live for, I think, almost 75% of the fight. Scott's Ferrothorn did work. Had we known it was going to live so long, we probably would have put Bolt Seed or something else on it, but still worked very well. The main points to consider with this strategy are you only need 2 OT Pokemon, I would say. So if you're going to prepare for this, what you would do is, I would say prepare a Jinx and then a Blissey, and then find someone, or you can be the person that also makes the Bronzong. Both Blissey and Bronzong may be useful in the future. Bronzong almost definitely as a Trick Roomer. Blissey had seen use a long time ago. Pre-raids, we saw it was a triple battle alpha starter boss in the anniversary. So there is precedent for using specially defensive Blissies in fights like this, where there's tons of special damage going around that you need to outlast. Blissey seems to be the best option. Chansey can also be used here. Other people have used Chansey to beat Suicune. I just think that this strategy is a bit more brain dead and easier to use overall. You'll want to breed those OT, so Jinx and Blissey OT, or Jinx and Bronzong OT, and then you can supplement with, borrowed from either, you can buy off the GTL and then resell when you're done, borrow from friends, borrow from team members, that sort of thing. It really requires a minimal amount of actual Pokemon to run the strategy, so there's a lot of flexibility in how you run it. The main thing that you'll have to consider, though, is the Blissey speed can be annoying depending on who has what Blissey. So you'll want to set yourself up so that you can trade Blissies easily. That happened with myself and Rainer. We had to swap Blissies in order to get the speed working. Essentially, the slowest Blissey has to be the last one to set up so it can copycat Ferrothorn's Ingrain correctly. Getting a little bit ahead of myself because I haven't really talked about the strategy, so let's just get into that. First things first, this is going to be very difficult to follow probably. So obviously with most of my content, I link guides. So this written guide came out long before this video is coming out. This video is just sort of going to accompany the written guide. So I highly recommend you check that. And additionally, there's a spreadsheet that I put in there that allows you to set up your link order. So you'll be able to swap the rows around and type in who's where in order to, and then once you have that set, you can then reference that with your link members to understand who's doing what and when. The setup does get very confusing. So I highly recommend you have that stuff up. I'm just going over the mechanics really quickly. Suicune has a type policy that we need to skill swap at the beginning. I'm sorry, not skill swap. We need to trick at the beginning with the toxic orb. That's just the best option. You could technically knock it off, but if you get that extra toxic chip damage initially, that's nice. We have the winds mechanic that we saw in Mandibuzz. So what happens is light Pokemon and floating and flying Pokemon get swapped out at the end of turn and take damage. Heavy Pokemon stay in. If you Ingrain or Suction Cups, you stay in regardless. So that's why we're setting up Ingrain on our Blissies. Permanent Rain gets set up at 80%. We're using this to our advantage. We're getting Dry Skin on our Blissies. So that's going to be healing over time, which will negate most of the damage that they take. At around 67%, Suicune takes a shield, or puts up a shield that will block damage that of consecutive types. So if you were to use, let's say, an electric type, attack and then another electric type attack, that next attack will do 0 damage. So you have to alternate the types that you use. So that's why we're doing Psywave on one Blissey that's PP maxed and Seismic Toss on the other of the 2 damaging Blisseys. At 50%, it will use a Calm Mind. We don't care about this because we'll be captivating that off. We're going to be maintaining Captivate, which reduces the boss's special attack. You may know that there is a gender mechanic in regular Pokemon for that. In raids in PokeMMO, they have removed that gender mechanic, so it can be used regardless, especially on the genderless Suicune. There's a Tailwinds somewhere there after the fight, and there may be another mechanic that I'm missing. But any other mechanics are kind of irrelevant to the strategy. So those are the main points of consideration. Overall, you can kind of separate the fight into 2 kind of phases. The first is the setup phase where we get the Blissey set up. And then the second phase after that is the damage phase where we're just kind of alternating the Seismic Toss and Psywaves. And then the Captivate Blissey will be captivating, toxicking, and healing itself. As far as composition goes, almost every player will need a Blissey and a Jinx. The Bronzong player will not need a Blissey, though it couldn't hurt to have one to bring in later, just as they're kind of cycling through all their Pokemon. So we've got that. We need one fast trick user. We use Infernape. Starmie's a good option. Doesn't really matter what you use here. And that's pretty much it. The 2 Ferrothorns will go... depending on where you get your Bronzong set up, they'll go on different players, but they can be swapped around because you have so many blank slots. Most will just require the Jinx and the Blissey, and then they can just bring 4 Otemon. So theoretically, a couple of the players on the team could have 0 Mons that they prepared for this, and they can just borrow or buy the required Pokemon. The tough part is you just don't know what the link order will be, so you can't really do this ahead of time. But this whole strategy kind of revolves around being able to set up with any players rather than having to find 4 players and then breed for the encounter. The important thing to remember is the link order cannot be reset as far as we're aware. It must be some sort of internal ID that determines the link order. So you're unable to change what order you're in at any point. So you have to, part of the setup eventually will be to do that. So that's just what to keep in mind when you're kind of building your composition. That's why, as far as breeding goes, I recommend you make a Blissey ahead of time and a Jinx, or you can pick the Bronzong, like I said earlier. Basically, because you don't know what the order is, it's easier to just have all those Pokemon bred as OTs ready to go. The Blissey being the wild card in case you do need to swap those. But yeah, that's pretty much it for composition. I guess we'll talk about items. For the Blisseys, you'll want to get them, I would say, plus 29 in HP and special defense, and then obviously EV them in HP and special defense. We're doing fixed damage moves, so the other stats don't matter. Speed, I would try to get, it's tough to say, but I would recommend getting it higher. That way, your speed stats are all a little bit closer, and you can potentially modify them to get the speed a bit closer, but you'll also be able to just trade the Blisseys around, so it's not that much of a point of consideration. If you've got the money, make this a bit better, put into those other stats. But in reality, this Blissey will probably only see use in special fights anyway, so you could maybe ignore the defense stat and just do those 2. So it could be a very budget breed. Ferrothorn, one Ferrothorn can basically just be a throwaway. The other one on the Bronzong user can be much better, just because we had our Bronzong live a long time. So getting it up there, making it calm or careful, putting the plus 29 special defense and HP stats and EVing them up. Also doesn't hurt. Ferrothorn might see more use outside of just this, so you could potentially throw better defensive stats on it. Speed obviously does not matter. Attack stat could be good, just given that we are using that attack stat, though it's not required. The Bronzong, same thing. We're making it calm, careful. It does not need to be that great though, just because it only really needs to survive slightly. It's going to get blown out and then take damage. So it just needs to live long enough to set Trick Room and then come back in. Under Trick Room, it sets Light Screen, and it's Light Clay. Basically, we just want that Light Screen up for a little while to get to the Rain phase, but more on that later. And then finally, Jinx can be pretty much anything. It's very easy to make this your OT. Does need the HA Dry Skin. It needs the ability Skill Swap, and then otherwise, If you are breeding this yourself, just don't put speed EVs in it. If you have one already that has speed EVs in it, just use Iron Ball if you're using it under Trick Room. Otherwise, if it's the first Jinx that goes, it does need to outspeed the Suicune to get the skill swap off. So that's just the point of consideration on Jinx. Basically, it needs to be slow if it's going after Trick Room is set. It needs to be fast if it's going before Trick Room is set. You can use Iron Ball to slow it down or Scarf to speed it up. It's going to get one-hit KO pretty quickly by Shadow Ball anyway. So really does not matter that much, but it's easy to have this one as an OT, so I do recommend that. For move sets, I would recommend not move setting your Blissies until you have your link order down. That's because you may need to swap them around depending. And then once you have that figured out, you'll be able to set which one is like your Captivate Blissey, which one is your Light Screen Blissey, and which one's your Skill Swap Blissey. So that would just be, once you've got the link order figured out, you can move set. But otherwise, the move sets are pretty straightforward for the rest. Obviously, Skill Swap on Jinx, Trick Room and Light Screen on that Bronzong. The Ferrothorn needs Ingrain. Leech Seed, Egg Move recommended if you're breeding a Ferrothorn. If it doesn't have it, that's not a big deal. That's just that the Bronzong users Ferrothorn can stay alive a really long time with Ingrain and Leech Seed maintained up. So the first step in all this process is actually getting your link together. This is a really pivotal step, probably the hardest and most time consuming, but you'll need to get 4 players together. 3 of them need to have the Blissey. 1 of them needs to have the Bronzong. Even better if the Bronzong user has a Blissey for flexibility. Basically, you'll need to figure out what your link order is. So everyone's just going to go to the raid den. As you can see here, route that 37 in Johto. You'll all just queue up with no intention of actually doing the raid. You're just going to queue up, start the battle, and see where everyone is. Type in link chat, whatever slot you're in. From left to right, you'll go, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're in the 2 slot, you say I'm player 2 or I'm in the 2 slot, and so on and so forth. You'll figure out who's where, and then you can follow the written guide and say, okay, here are all of our slots. We have Bronzong on the inside, then we're going to use this setup. We have Bronzong on the outside, then we're going to use this other setup. Basically, if the Bronzong is in the 2 or the 3 slot, it'll change what the order is slightly. If it's on the outside, it's just a slightly different modified setup. The gist of it is the skill swap Blissey needs to go on the outside of wherever the Bronzong is, and then it changes the middle slightly. The reason for all of this is skill swap can only happen to an adjacent Pokemon, and we need to skill swap twice from a Jinx directly to a Blissey. So it has to be in an order that allows everything to play out well. You'll kind of see in the images provided later. The last thing is the last Blissey that goes needs to be the slowest. The speed doesn't matter for the first 2, but the last Blissey that goes needs to be the slowest so that it copycats the Ingrain and not another Blissey's move. So just make sure that whatever Blissey is slowest goes there. You can swap Blissey's around at this point if they're close enough in EVs or in actual raw stats. You can modify the EVs. If their IVs are too far off, that might be too much. Hopefully you have the OTs to be able to switch well here. If you have that OT Jinx, it makes this process easy. In my run, we had to swap Blissey's, Rainer, and I. So just swap as needed, figure out what your comp is, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the setup now. And then once you're ready to actually start queuing, one thing to consider is the ads. You'll want to reset if you get Swanna or Kingdra. Golduck is a little bit iffy, but we were able to clear on Golduck with this strategy, so it should be fine. But basically, Kingdra, Swanna equals reset. So you just queue and then forfeit immediately if you see either of those ads. As far as turn-by-turn order goes, I'll have a link in the description as well to our kill of it. Unfortunately, I just don't have the time to edit something that's like a very clear, concise, this is the first turn, this is the second turn. So I'm just going to talk through it, and then you can reference either the written guide or this video and sort of get a gist of how it goes. But I'll talk through it in detail so that you have a good understanding of what happens. Basically, on the first turn, we're just setting up. We are tricking to get rid of the type policy on Suicune. We are skill swapping one of the ads, and then we are setting Trick Room for the whole setup to happen. The main thing to consider is the dead slot. There's just a damaging slot, so someone will just have to use like an electric or grass type attacker to do some damage. And that user won't end up using their Jinx. We're talking through right now. The Bronzong is on the outside. You can mirror this if it's in the P1 slot, for example. Just in this one, it's in P4. But that's basically everything that happens on P1. Jinx skill swaps the ad. the electric type or whatever damaging type user just hits Suicune, gets us to the rain faster for dry skin. We trick Toxic Orb to set Toxic, and then the Bronzong Trick Rooms. Then the players opposite the Bronzong both bring in their Blissies. The user adjacent to the Bronzong brings in their Ferrothorn. This is because eventually we'll need to, in turn 3, you'll see with the Jinx skill swaps onto the Blissey, it has to be adjacent. So that's why we're having this happen first, because then we'll need to use the other Jinx down the line to swap that dry skin over, as you can see. So Jinx, so back to turn 2 though. Just the timing of things, the Bronzong user is just going to bring in any Pokemon that's going to hard switch to a Pokemon that it sacrifices. It doesn't really matter what it is, just need it to die. So this is just to space out turns and do spacing. Ferrothorn uses Ingrain, and then the Blissies use Copycat. The Copycat will almost definitely go off unless I don't even know if it's possible to not have the Blissies go after the Ferrothorn. But basically, Ferrothorn's going to go first. It's going to use Ingrain, and then Blissey uses Copycat. Copycat is just whatever the last move is that was used. So it does not have to be adjacent. That sort of allows the 2 Blissies to set up here by themselves. Then the next turn, the outside Blissey is going to skill swap onto the ad that the initial turn 1 Jinx skill swap Dry Skin onto. This is sort of where the skill swap Blissey goes, and then the Captivate and Light Screen Blissies can go on either of the other 2 slots. It doesn't really matter. Both just need to have skill swap. They need to be skill swapped onto. So we have the second Blissey go, it's skill swapped. Bronzong comes back in to click Light Screen, and the that Blissey that is being skill swapped onto can pretty much do anything. I wouldn't recommend. It can't Toxic if that's the Captivate Blissey. You can click it anyway. I wouldn't recommend captivating this early because it might be too little damage. And what will happen is if you do too little damage, the boss will not be able to reliably kill either the sacrificial Pokemon or the Jinx or the Bronzong, and you'll end up having the timing being off. You'll run out of Trick Room, and then Jinx won't be able to skill swap with Iron Ball at the very end on that last turn. So that happened to us in the setup. If that does happen, that's the only point of RNG kind of in the fight, but it's in the setup, so that's fine. We're okay with that. So moving on to the next turn, the first 2 Blissies are pretty much set up at this point, and then we just move into setting up the third Blissey. Same thing happens with that Blissey. This is why this Blissey needs to be the slowest, because the other 2 Blissies can move and do anything. And then the Ferrothorn will use Ingrain, slowest Blissey then copycats that Ingrain, and then the other 2 Blissies are free to do damage, or they can Captivate at this point. Actually, I still wouldn't Captivate at this point, just because the Ferrothorn's going to eject button out. Oh yeah, that's another thing that I forgot to mention. Each Ferrothorn is going to eject button out. You'll want to switch to something that is pretty frail as a sac Pokemon. I just used some fire types that I had. Just something that will reliably get fainted, just so that you're able to pick the Pokemon that goes in next and doesn't mess with the timing. So that Ferrothorn's going to get eject buttoned out, so still don't Captivate. So just the Captivate user can just Toxic into the boss anyway, burn some Toxic PP, you don't need all that much. And then eventually you start to setting Captivate afterwards. Then once the Ferrothorn's ejected out, they go to sacrifice Pokemon. That Bronzong user, the Trick Room user, brings Jinx back in, skill swaps to the Blissey, and the other 2 Blissies are free to do whatever damage or Captivate at this point. Captivate would be good, especially if that Ferrothorn is coming back in to stay a long time. Just some things to float out there. If you've got Lapras, that's great. The last user can go AV Lapras and use Whirlpool and Psywave potentially to do damage, or Thunder. I would have both options, just because you will potentially need to alternate those types. Or no, it's Dragon Rage. Sorry. No, you can. Okay, so it's Dragon Rage on Lapras, and you can use Whirlpool for Chip. So that Lapras can live a very long time with Water Absorb. Just would recommend it. The Ferrothorn can also live a long time, though it really does not matter. Those are all minor optimizations. At this point, you should be good to go. If you need to do the alternate setup, if Bronzong is in the middle, basically it's the same thing, but you need to make sure that you always have a Jinx adjacent to a Blissey. So in this case, the non-Bronzong side is going to have one Blissey set up, and then the Bronzong side is going to have a Blissey set up. Both the two outside Blissies are going to be set up first, and then the inside Blissey is going to be set up last, because the Bronzong's on the inside, so you'll eventually need the Jinx from that user to skill swap onto the adjacent Blissey. That's the only main wrinkle for this. I have these pictures in the guides themselves, as well as text to kind of follow along and pick from like who's doing what. There are some things that are flexible, like the electric user and trick user can go on pretty much anyone. The Jinx user is a little bit more set in stone. Jinx has to be used on the correct side, otherwise you won't be able to skill swap off the correct ad for the skill swap Blissey. It has to go on the outside Blissey. Once you're in the sort of damage phase of the fight, you've got the full setup. Basically, what you're going to be doing is each Blissey is going to be alternating Seismic Toss, Psywave. You will want a PP Max Psywave, as it's only, I think, 16, something like that. It goes up to 24, I want to say. I forget what the exact math is, but PP Max Psywave, I think Seismic Toss is 30 base, so that's all you really need. Potentially PP Max Soft Boiled, just in case one Blissey gets focused. I do recommend Soft Boiled over Wish, just because Soft Boiled is overall healing is reduced, and we don't really care about that all that much here. Wish just gets a little bit weird. If you have a turn where like Light Screen goes down and Captivate is off, it's going to do a lot of damage, and timing those wishes can be weird. I'd rather have the instant kind of 30% heal of Soft Boiled rather than the turn later 50% Wish heal. So that's just a recommendation. If you have Wish already and you don't want to take it off, that's also fine. It doesn't matter all that much. Wish is just slightly more difficult to pilot. The Captivate Blissey will just be using Captivate as often as possible. If you really don't want to think about making sure you have Captivate PP for the whole fight, you can just PP Max Captivate. That way you can basically spam it. That Captivate Blissey will also be using Toxic to maintain damage. It's got a heal. And then we left skill swap on it in order, or did we? No, we didn't. The Captivate Blissey, it has Copycat as that final move. So it's got Captivate, Copycat, Soft Boiled, and Toxic as its damaging move. So you're just going to kind of be healing as needed, Toxicking when it's down, and Captivating pretty much the rest of the time. Captivate will roll, so that means it won't just shrug off the attack drops all at once. So it will roll. It will shrug off the last use. So it will go from, let's say, like -4 to -2 on if one falls off. It won't just wipe them all at one point. So you can use Captivate as often as possible. That really lowers Suicune and one ad's damage all the way down. That way you're kind of really minimizing all damage done. And then finally the Light Screen Blissey, the one that didn't have skill swap on it, it got Dry Skin skill swapped onto it, so it didn't need it. We're freeing this slot for Light Screen. So once the Bronzong's Light Clay Light Screen goes down, that Blissey will then just Light Screen on those turns. You'll just have to make sure that no Blissey is low that turn. It probably won't be that big of a deal, but you want to make sure that you're captivating before that Light Screen turn wears off, and making sure that everything is topped up. Every Blissey is topped up, just because there will be a lot of damage going out on the non-Light Screen turn. We had an initial run before we even started using Light Screen regularly that one Blissey just got focused down before it was even able to get a Soft Boiled off. So that's just one main point of consideration, is on those turns where you reset Light Screen, make sure you've captivated the turn before and you're healed up. But otherwise, you can just go pretty much like a Captivate Toxic cadence, or Captivate heal will work. Overall, you just got to be kind of flexible. Pay attention. Don't mash. Just kind of check in with the team. Do you think this is good? This is good. And then that Bronzong user can just cycle through their Pokemon. We had that Ferrothorn obviously stay out for a really long time if you watch the video, but it will pretty much be an AFK for them for the rest of the fight. So, and that's pretty much all of the Suicune raid. Apologies that this guide isn't more polished. I wanted to get this out there because it'll enable more players, I think, to get Suicune done in this limited time that it's available. It is only available during the Christmas event. And really, this strategy doesn't require all that much to set up, and requires way less commitment to preparation. Before, players were getting together in links and then breeding once they figured out their link order, because link order couldn't be reset. So this enables you to find pretty much any other 3 players that are interested in doing this raid and committing to finishing it. There will be a little bit of getting used to the order. Some people may accidentally skill swap onto the boss instead of a Blissey, just out of habit, you know, doing their alphas and skill swapping contrary. Definitely do that. Wouldn't recommend. I definitely did not do that, of course, in one of our failed attempts. So, yeah, long story short is less polished guide. Apologies for that. Just what expediency's sake, this is a limited time event, and I think that will help more people get this done. And the additional polish might not really necessarily help anyone understand it better. Use the written guide, use the sheet that I've provided. Super special shout out and thanks to Secret, Minoveric, and Jedge. All of them are kind of incredible at this game, and they really polished the Chinese strat out. And then obviously Rainer is a goat, and Scott and Kyle for helping me in the run. Rainer kind of shot called the whole thing. He's obviously very good at the game. I'm gonna link his YouTube in the description. He's super smart. Recommend following him. I've learned probably an insane amount from him. So would really recommend that. Otherwise, go get your Suicunes. Good luck. That's pretty much it. Yeah. So much. Yeah. Great outro here. Good job. All right. Bye.